Hello, I'm Toycat, and let me show you one of the best uses of Google Maps' 3D view, because this is a road in Texas. In fact, this is two very big roads intersecting in Texas, and there are so many lanes going everywhere, it's near impossible to understand what's happening until you go to satellite view, hit this 3D button, and start to scan around it and see that, like, whoa, there is a lot going on here. There is a road going through here, with a road above that road, with a road going above that road, with a highway off-ramp going over that, with another highway off-ramp going above that, making a high 5 interchange, because there are 5 separate layers to it. It is wild to look at no matter what angle you're at, and there is only one place in the world where they go for 6 layers of interchange. Make a guess as to what it is right now. I guarantee you're probably incorrect by the time we get to the end, but the other thing that is interesting about this is not just seeing the road and really understanding, wow, the level of architecture here is taller than most buildings in the area, but also it's the fact that there are all sorts of weird things you can see. Like, look at this. There is a random floating island at this interchange. That's right, this island is attached to nothing. There's a random floating saucer, and what I assume this actually is the top of a street light that is just below it. That's my best guess at the very least. But yeah, you can see that, like, there are all sorts of weird roads that you can look at in Google Maps, and recently I feel like there's a trend on YouTube of being like, wow, America sure does build too many roads, and so rather than just saying that, I feel like it'd be fun to look at some of the widest ones, because as someone who's not American, I can look at from a side and be like, whoa, what are you doing there? Because one of the weirdest ones I found recently, where I was sure for a while Google Maps glitched, I was looking at Chicago. It's an interesting city, right? And it's the 3rd biggest in the United States by population, and they have this. It's the Interstate 90 highway, although it's also Interstate 94. It's also the Kennedy Expressway, and also some on-ramps and off-ramps going side by side, leading to what looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 highways side by side. And obviously, some of those are off-ramps, it looks like. Some of those are on-ramps, so it's more like, 6 highways, or maybe 4 highways side by side. What is actually happening here? You can't understand on Street View, or sorry, you can't understand on the map view. You can't even understand on satellite view. It just looks like a lot of roadworks are happening. Like, what is this in the middle? What is this over there? It's near impossible to tell. So when you go into 3D view, you can start to work out, like, oh, so this is a highway interchange where every single street gets an on-ramp, off-ramp, which is wild enough by itself, but then you can see that the on-ramps are actually in the middle of the road. So they merge into the middle lane, the fast lane, if you want to use that terminology. I feel like a lot of Americans do. So you merge into the fastest lane, the left lane of traffic. Would that be the one in America? Yeah, the left lane of traffic, the fastest lane, and then you exit on the right side. If you look on the other side, you can see it a little bit more clearly here. So this is the way onto the highway, onto the left, while this is the way off, but then this is the next way off, and then this is the next way off. Because they have one of these every single block, it leads to this very, very, very wild thing. And so yeah, this is actually not a very wide highway, it's just a highway where they have a lot of on and off ramps, which just leads to an insane amount of traffic. There is some cleverness to the design of merging people on one side while having them come off on the other, because this is a place where clearly a lot of people must exit, or they probably wouldn't build all these ramps, but it just leads to some very, very wild road design in what is, by the way, the Midwest's big city, the 3rd biggest city in the country. This is a place filled with skyscrapers, and I don't mean like, oh yeah, like miles away there are skyscrapers. I mean like 2 blocks away there are buildings that are worth hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of real estate, and instead of having more skyscrapers here, or even, let's say more train stations, or Lou Mitchell's, or Crown Plazas, or Mariana's, or Whole Foods. There could be a Whole Foods right here, or a, even indeed a park if you really insist on being boring. But instead, there's a giant highway going through an entire city block, right? I mean, I feel like this hotel is right next to the highway on ramp, which is a weird thing. But that you can see that, like, it's a weird design for a city, and that is why I think this is interesting to talk about. Is because, something a lot of people don't like to admit is you do need roads. I mean, even if you look at the countries around the world, you look at like the longest road networks. All of the big countries understand you need roads. You need to connect places, and the majority of places, that's the easiest, way, at least cheapest way to connect a lot of places. And so, a lot of people like kind of miss that point. It's just that when you get to places with insane land values, such as cities, it probably makes sense not to have it go through the center. But yeah, anyway, let's speak about Goose Island real quick. Did you know there's a place called Goose Island in Chicago? I didn't know, or I would have considered moving there. Speaking of places I'm considering moving, I was recently in Canada, and you might know this. I was in Quebec. I kind of want to make a video about the Quebec experience because, my instinct is like anywhere that like aggressively removes the English language deliberately from their stuff, probably not the best of places. But anyway, the point is that I was in Canada, and I also went on the Highway 401. This is known as the highway with the most lanes for the longest distance. It's one of those weird characteristics where it's hard to say, but the 401 highway right here is the most lanes lanes of highway, the widest highway in the world, at least according to most people, if you ask them. And it's funny because Canada, you'd figure would be like, oh yeah, we're going to make a better system. It's Toronto too, like it's a big city. They could have worked out a better transit system, but no, they're like, we'll have a highway, so it's 4 lanes of highway, then it's 4 lanes of I'm going to exit soon highway, or 3 lanes of exit soon highway, then there's a couple lanes of exit ramp, and then in some cases it goes even more, to the point where you get 22 travel lanes, which is just wild to look at. And the fact is, when I was on this highway, despite being in the very leftmost lane, the fast lane, the express lane, the through lane, whatever you want to call it was still incredibly busy. In fact, even funnier about this is the fact that not only is there 22 lanes in some parts of this, like I don't even want to pretend I understand what's happening here, by the way, like what but despite the fact that there are so many lanes, I mean, look at this. Just look at the insanity that is happening here. Whoa, look at that. It's a big highway. It's bigger than I'm used to at the very least. Despite the fact that that's true, something that you might not know about Toronto is they actually have like a second highway to the north just to make as many people go on that as possible. And even that is pretty big and busy and still doesn't fix traffic. It's an interesting issue they run into. But yeah, I call this the widest freeway in the world. A lot of people would argue that it's actually the Katy Freeway in Texas, which is it goes from Houston to, I would guess it goes to Katy, which is to the south of Houston somewhere. In fact, let's just type in Katy Freeway, Texas. There you go. It's to the west, apparently. So, yeah, when you go to the Katy Freeway, you can see, like, okay, yeah, this is also pretty darn big, but it's only so big because you count these side roads which go along the highway. So it's like lots of highway, there's a toll road in the middle, then there's a highway over here, then there's some off-ramps, then there's these things called frontage roads, which Texas does, which is like, instead of having people who are about to exit soon, exit from the highway and then immediately leave, they go on like a side road, kind of like a generic wide street in the United States. So you have like all of these different things side by side, and it's incredibly interesting to me. Speaking of things that are incredibly interesting to me, I might have said that so this road, or the one in Toronto, is the widest in the road, but I actually Googled it, just to be fun. I was curious, like, which of them is actually better? It turns out, according to the Guinness Book of Records, the only source we can trust is the Monumental Axis is the road in Brasilia from 1960, which is 6 lanes, by the way, which doesn't seem very long, but it's 250 meters wide, and I haven't looked it up, but I have a feeling that it's not right. I don't trust, I'm not going to say that I don't trust, actually, I shouldn't say I don't trust Guinness World Book of Records, but I wouldn't put a lot of faith in what they're saying, and so let's look at this road right here, the widest in the road, in the world, sorry. I mean, it's also the widest in the road. That would be a fair point. So I'm guessing these travel lanes are just absurdly wide. Nope. Is this 250 meters wide? I feel like we're really pushing the definition of that. Maybe it's because the other side of it is over there. Ah, yeah, that's what it is. This is the widest road because technically speaking, this park, instead of being a pure park, has highway ramps on it, maybe? Does this count as the widest road in the world to you? I feel like we're really pushing what the definition of wide is, if that was all travel lanes in the middle, or if you're allowed to, like, okay, let's check. Are you allowed to just get off the highway and drive through the park? If so, I'm going to count this as the widest road in the world. If not, I'm a little more cautious about it. So, also, did you see that? That was like a bike lane on here. But yeah, if there's like a, okay, they don't want you to drive up there. They put this little road here, but it looks like it's a road for people. What do they even call those? Like a people road? But yeah, there is no way to drive on there. This is therefore only the widest road in the world by technicality, and I bet by technicality there's a wider road, right? Do you know of one? Internet, do you want to prove the Guinness Book of World Records wrong? I mean, not that that's ever happened to them before. Speaking of things that have never happened to people, we can look at wide roads all day, and so let's do it, because a lot of people do like to say, like, yeah, the wide roads is like a North America problem, and I guess we've been speaking mostly about North America, but it's interesting because the whole world does use highways, right? Like, if you go to Frankfurt, which is like Germany's logistics hub, and you look at the roads around there, you're also going to get some wild highway interchanges. I mean, admittedly, they're not as many lanes. Like, I think there's this like European thing where we're like, okay, we give up at a certain point, 3 lanes in the middle, maybe 4 lanes when you're getting close to a city, and then like you can have like some highway off ramps that might go a little longer if they're going somewhere major, but that's as big as we're ever going to try, and then invest in other ways to stop people using the roads. That might be one of the big differences, but there still is, like, look at this highway infrastructure in Germany. Germany, where, by the way, people can go at insane speeds. You can do this basically anywhere in the world. What to me is more interesting than saying roads are bad and blah, 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 is actually to look at instead, like, the designs that are actually used. So this is a pretty standard, I think it's called a cloverleaf design, right? Two roads intersect. You want people to go from road to road without having to slow down too much. So you have them go kind of continuously in a loop. And the fun thing about these loops is you can go around endlessly. So you could drive from this one over to this one, round to this, and you could drive around an endless loop around the clover if you wanted to. Don't think it's illegal, but that is the design that is used for most big roads when they get really busy. But what's interesting to me is how people deal with their standard intersections beyond that. So outside of Frankfurt, let's go to Darmstadt, for example. So once you're here and you're on the highway, the interchanges get a little bit more lazy. They're just like, okay, you just kind of fall onto it, or you go around to come off it. Like, you can see it looks a bit more like a... I'm not going to say, but you can see that, like, the interchanges get, like, a little kind of differently done, right? In this case, the two roads merge at the same time, so you have to do one bridge. You can see that, like, costs kind of go down, and so the standard design varies from the most efficient design, because spending spending $1 billion on a highway interchange every single time you want to do it, not the best way. And so in the UK, the best example is we tend to use roundabouts. Like, when you come off the motorway, in this case, the M1, to come to, is that Luton? You go on a roundabout, which usually, not always, has the little traffic lights on it. So it says, like, you can go on, and then you go round, and so one piece of road can serve every single person coming on or off this, which, in the case of this, it's only one road off and two roads on, but, it can be a lot more than this in some cases. I'm sure just up the road here, it's two roads on and one road off. Way less interesting. I'll go to where I passed my driving test, and I'll show you the roundabout that I should have failed it on, by the way. But if you look at instead over this, and you're like, okay, look at this. This is it's still only 4 roads on. Okay, here we go. You can see that, like, okay, there's a lot coming on and off, and it can all be done with the same roundabout. Wow, very clever. Whereas while I was in Quebec recently, oh wow, am I mentioning my travel too much on this channel? But I was driving this road between Quebec and Montreal, and interestingly enough, like, every single highway there seems to instead go for this design, where they keep the two roads together as much as they can. And so there's some very, very interesting things this leads to. One is you've got this, like, really long straight. If you want to accelerate in a place you're not going to be caught by the police, you just go zoom all the way to the end of this, which Tap definitely didn't do, I should say. I follow all and any laws in the countries that I go through. But the other thing that's interesting is the fact that, yeah, there's like a standard design. If you look at this, you can see this is used over here as well. In this case, it's kind of inverted. But as you're going, you start to realize that every country has a different, like, design language, like a signature, because once you build something once, it's easier to build it again. And I think that is one of the big reasons that the United States is very car heavy, right? Like, building a metro system, besides New York, who has a very, very famous one, there aren't many big all-encompassing city ones, so it's hard to do it from scratch. I mean, if you look at San Francisco or California as a whole, they want to build rail, and they're just doing a not very good job at it, because if you don't have the expertise in doing so, you're just kind of trying something that you've heard is a good idea. The first time you do something is always way harder than the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, etc. And I think that is why European cities at much smaller scales, my favorite example is, like, there's a tiny city out here somewhere. Is it Rennes? Has a metro. I think it is Rennes. But there's like tiny cities in Europe which will have metro. Oh, it is Rennes. There we go. So Rennes has a metro. Do you know how many people live in Rennes? I don't know how many people live in Rennes, but it's far too small. You might expect, and it's incredibly small. Actually, let's find out the population. I'm guessing like 240,000 or something like that. So we'll go to Wikipedia, spoil the part that's coming up later in the video, and we'll go to Rennes just to find out their population. And you can see that it's like population, urban area, metro. So it's about 222,000. It's less than I expected. It's a fairly small city, but they go for the metro because the metro guys already done their stuff anyway. Whereas when you're in there's this interesting thing about like kind of conformity within a country. You kind of just assume you should do the same thing your neighbor's doing, and the same thing works for cities and for regions and even for provinces or states or countries in a continent. Like the United States and Canada will follow a lot from each other just because they're next door and it's the easy thing to follow. And all the guys, you can just bring them over if you really want to. Whereas it's much harder to do a design language that was built for a different continent or built for something like that. But I think the bigger thing that comes up when we're talking about highway interchanges, because there's some really insane roads where you think like, should you have built this or should you have worked out getting fewer people on the road so you didn't have to build this, is a really interesting debate that people have on the internet. And I kind of come across as agnostic on this. A lot of people love to be anti-car and like, oh, the car is literally killing the world. Or they love to be, nah, the car is the only thing everyone should drive. We should demolish buses and train tracks, and we should have cars go on them anyway. Why are there train tracks when my cars don't have rails on them? But the interesting thing to me is the hate that people have for the Elon Musk the Hyperloop or whatever it's called. It's fun to hate on, but it is an interesting idea, right? So people have these big hatreds for things because like it's easy to get tribalistic, but I think the reality of it, if I was to simplify it down, is what do you know? I've already simplified it down. Is the number of journeys you do by car, we'll use red for car here, the cost per journey goes up as more people are doing them. This is because as more people converge into one area, for example, a city, you can pick any city, but like, I don't know, New York is the biggest example for the United States. The real estate value here is insane. So when you build this instead of, it's a tunnel, bad example. The Washington Bridge is the one I'm trying to go for. When you build this instead of a whole block of a neighborhood, instead of a whole 4 blocks of a neighborhood, you're talking about genuinely billions of dollars just in land value before you talk about the construction value, the pollution value, all those things that do actually affect people. The more people are around something, the more people will be negatively affected. So that becomes really wildly expensive. I mean, look at this, actually. I didn't realize, this is Manhattan Island. It's covered in highway. I didn't realize just how insane this one was. But constructing that gets more and more expensive because not only are you having all these knock-on effects that you don't have to care about if you're being purely economically minded, but you do have to worry about land value and about all the extra roads and capacity you have to build. So the cost of car journeys go up as you do more of them, whereas the cost of metro journeys is insane. If I had a metro just for me to get to where I want to go, let's be honest, the biggest problem is how there's not a metro line between my house and Best Kebab. Why is it that I have to take a train and then transfer to a tube? And you know what? What is the deal with that? Why am I doing that, London? Why is there not a personal line between my house and the Best Kebab ordering line? It would be a one-person metro line. It would cost them billions to build, so it'd be really expensive per journey, right? But if I built, if we made it like between just the area where Best Kebab is and, like my area, then the cost would go down quite a bit, right? And if we made it a way more generalized line that everyone in the city starts to use, the cost per journey goes down because the fixed costs are pretty high, but the variable costs are pretty low. A train with 1 person or 200 people on it doesn't really cost a lot more to run. And so at a certain city size, it makes more sense to put people in, trains and buses and trams or whatever mass transport options you have than cars. It's a big debate that people like to believe is a part of their identity sometimes, that like, no, you don't understand, public transport's just better, or cars are just better because I went for all this effort and I pay a lot of money on insurance, or public transport's just better because I don't want to have to go through the effort and I don't want to have to get in a car every time and almost kill people. There's a lot of valid reasons not to want to drive or to want to, but I think the simplest way to do this is just like self-selectively sort people. This is my controversial take here, but I think people should, if you really want to live somewhere where you have these things, you need to move somewhere where the cost per journey gets lower, i.e. a city. And if you want to live somewhere where you drive your car, don't live in downtown Chicago, for God's sake. I really can't stress enough how weird of an idea that is. Maybe you should instead go and live somewhere further out where actually, the car is the welcome. Like, look at these highway intersections. There's so many of them everywhere, huh? But yeah, my point is to say, with this video, that it doesn't matter where you live. It does matter where you live much more than what you believe, because ultimately, people who live in Wisconsin Dells are probably going to have a lot more in common with you if you love driving everywhere in that independent spirit than people in the downtown of a city. There are some problems with self-selection, and I'm sure it gets people into bubbles where it's not as good. Like, it'd be nice if people with different views all live together, but when it comes to how you should design these things, that's my kind of thing on that. I think so many of our world problems could be solved if okay, so take any issue in that you can imagine. Okay, some people want to have high taxes to have a lot of stuff together. They can all be in one place, have their high taxes fund each other. People who want to have low taxes can all live together in one place. People who want to have high medical restrictions, yeah, you shouldn't be going outside or you shouldn't be doing this, all live in one place. People who want to live in somewhere where there's no speed limit or they can do whatever they want, they could go, I think basically any issue can be solved where people who are like-minded were living together. But instead we have our current system because people won't move across the world just for higher speed limits or fewer COVID restrictions or whatever belief you have about roads or taxes or whatever else it is. And so in that world, maybe we should just learn to realize that there are trade-offs and there are reasons that people think the way they do, and it's probably not just that they're dumb. Or maybe it is that they're dumb. If you disagree with me, you're dumb, which is why I want to give you a quick heads up. I'm doing a fun trip, literally this week actually. I'm trying to go to as many countries' McDonald's as I can in 30 minutes. And it's gonna be a fun little trip. I might share it on this channel. It might be a third channel thing. If you're not already following, go check out Andrew Andrews. It's my, this is my low quality I talk at Google Maps camera. Imagine how low the quality gets there. So if you want to see it, go to Andrew Andrews. I think we've gone a little bit of a property kick on that channel. But yeah, go follow it if you want to see me go to lots of countries just for their McDonald's, and stay on this channel for a video about what Quebec gets right. Because, it's an interesting place, right? With lots of good things, and I am not being forced to say this, but what I am being forced to say is subscribe or buy my merch. You can get mugs that remind you we're all gonna die someday, or you can just be a mug and you can leave this video and go do whatever you feel like doing, because it's over now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Or don't. I want to go to Brasilia. This is an interesting looking city, right? Look at this road. It's a circle. You could drive around it all day forever. No one could stop you. Anyway, yeah. See ya. Is the video over? I think I'm lying to you. I think that the video's not over, actually. I think instead... Look at this. Have you noticed how Brasilia looks suspiciously like Pennsylvania? I'm just saying, it's a suspicious similarity, is it not? I'm just saying, we should get someone to look at that. Just like how you should look at the ending of this video, which is now. Bye.